Next time, no, when we go upstairs, hold on to the rail, okay? Because of
Don't want to be at the airport.
We're at the city of David, and we're on our way to see a movie about the city of David.
I guess
Good job. Good job.
Right by this light. Yoni, just hold that right there if you would, please.
Brothers and sisters, we are after the city of David, the beginnings of Jerusalem, the source of Jerusalem. So this would be a city called Salem, where one Melchizedek was the king of. This part of the city that we're about to visit today, strangely enough, was kind of lost in time up until the 20th century, actually. Trying to find for the origin of the city, the beginning of the city, everybody was looking for it inside of the city walls. This made sense that you want to find Jerusalem, you look for it inside the city walls, and if you turn around you will notice that we are outside the city walls right now. The southern part of the walls of the city ran straight into the walls of the Temple Mount, into the southern steps. And that was the architects who did that were during the Turkish Sultan Suleiman, and they were just building on the same layout that the Crusaders had, leaving this area, the southern slopes of the city of David, they left it outside of the city walls. But it actually made sense to look for the city over here. This is where it would start, because this is where the water source was, the Gihon spring. But ever since the days of Herod, even up to the 20th century, there was another water source, there was an aqueduct that Herod built and led water to the Temple Mount, and that was still into use even into the 20th century. And everybody kind of forgot about this little spring out over here, and the Gihon spring, they actually called it the Siloam spring because there was a pool in Siloam. Shiloach actually means sent, because Hezekiah is the guy who is in charge of sending the Gihon into that pool, and they forgot about the source and they just called it the Siloam spring for many years. And it would not be discovered till about 1867, and there was a company called the Palestine Expedition Fund, and most likely it was more like a whole bunch of spy work done by the British. They had an engineering officer that would come over here. His name was Charles Warren, and he, even before archaeology was a science, he already did archaeological digs through these shafts and piers that he would dig underground. And believe it or not, up until 1967, his digs were still the foundation of the archaeology here in Jerusalem. He's the first one who discovered that most likely the city came around here. So the water system is actually named after him. It's called the Warren Shaft. We'll be walking through the Warren Shaft today. The first time Jerusalem's ever mentioned in any type of epigraphic form would be around 3,900 years ago. And it's these little dolls, an Egyptian doll that has Jerusalem written on it, and it was a voodoo doll. The Egyptians who controlled this land, Canaan, by putting certain kings into position, city kings, they would have a doll for each city, and if one of these city kings would dare to rebel against the Egyptian, he'd say, "Give me the Jerusalem doll," and they'd put a whole bunch of curses on that doll and smash it to the ground before sending in their forces. So we found that doll as well. And the other thing that we found was diplomatic correspondence in a city that was called Mari, I believe. But it's all kinds of diplomatic correspondence between the king of Jerusalem and the pharaohs of Egypt, and those date back to about 3,600 years ago. And these are the first times we have any written word mentioning the name Yerushalayim, Jerusalem, Jerusalem. The diplomatic correspondence is actually letters of this king of Jerusalem asking the pharaoh for more reinforcements, for more forces, because he has these people called the Habirus coming in from the east. Some may have thought this relates to the Hebrews under Joshua, but maybe not. We'll never know. The real time that this city comes up into the knowledge of the world, in my opinion, would have been on that mountain over there, the mountain to the south. We call that mountain the Mount of Evil Counsel, because that is where the elders and the high priest took counsel to put Jesus to death. Later on, you'd see a building on the Mount of Evil Counsel. Believe it or not, that's the headquarters of the United Nations, on the Mount of Evil Counsel. But where that crane is, that was where the first time anybody coming from Beersheba, if you remember, that would be the first time that you could actually see this mountain called Mount Moriah. And it is believed that that is where Abraham stopped with Isaac. He kept all of his servants behind, and then him and Isaac would go down, maybe walk through this very city, making their way to this mountain behind us, which is Mount Moriah. And on the way, Isaac would turn to his father and he says, "I see you have the knife, the wood, the fire. Did you not forget the sacrifice?" And his answer, Abraham's answer is,
God will provide.
exactly. In Hebrew, Hashem Yera'eh. God will show the sacrifice. So some say maybe that's the meaning of this mountain, Moriah. Shon Moreh, I am Moraine, I am pointing. Mount Moriah shows you the way out of the valley of Israel. Moreh. So Moriah, shown by God, is the name of this mountain. And as you can see, Jerusalem is not on the high point of the mountain, but it's a little bit down below, and the mountain still continues to go up higher behind us. And actually, the city of David is all surrounded by mountains. The Mount of Olives, the Mount of Evil Counsel. Today there's a modern mountain, what they call the Western Hill, is known today as Mount Zion. And you can't help but remember the words that were probably written right here. As the mountains surround Jerusalem, so does the Lord surround his people. And actually, a lot of the Bible was written here as well. If not most of it, was written here in the city of David, where we are right now. We'll be concentrating today on how the city would have looked probably in the days of David, rather than in the model that we saw when you had those palaces of the queen and her sons of Mesopotamia. We'll be going down over here to see a short film. And then we'll walk down underground over here and make our way to the water source and go through the different water system and make our way at the Siloam pool down below. down below, and anybody who would want could pay 5 shekels and just get on a transport that would lead you back to the kiosk over here, back to the visitors center over here. The rest of us could walk up here. Then we'll regroup, we'll cross over the street and walk underground. But now we have to go see the film.